be surrounded by a million people, I still feel all alone. Just wanna go home. Oh, I miss you, you know. And I've been keeping all the letters that I wrote to you, each one a line or two. I'm fine, baby, how are you? Well, I would send them, but I know that it's just not enough. My words were cold and flat, and you deserve more than that. Another aeroplane, another sunny place. I'm lucky, I know, but I wanna go home. I got to go home. Let me go home. I'm just too far from where you are. I wanna come home.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome. You know, there's always plenty of seats in the front row. You never know when there's a $100 bill in the seat underneath in the front. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Convocation 2013. You can clap. In fact, just in case you don't know when to clap, I'll remind you. Okay. Well, thank you for being here this morning. Before we get started, I want to make sure that I thank several people for helping put this on today. I think last year I was a little remiss, I forgot to do that, but nothing happens by accident, and they make it look kind of seamless, but Angela Shelley and her team putting this on and taking care of all the coordinations and getting everything put together, we want to give them a big hand this morning. So let's thank that team. Also, the Turner staff, the crew here, the Tech Theater, they are unbelievable. Trust me. They can make anybody look good. So let's give them a big hand as well. You know, as we were planning for this year's convocation, we had lots of themes going through our minds, and we were thinking about lots of things we wanted to do. And, you know, I mentioned that, well, why don't I just sing? Why do I keep getting that reaction everywhere I do that? Well, so I'll sing. You know, I sound a lot like Blake Shelton. So I'll just sing a song, and you know, we'll kind of we'll make it a little bit of a musical. All right? Well, we had a couple of days of rehearsal, and the crew back there, in a very nice way, said, "You probably don't want to sing." And that's another thing we want to thank them for this morning. So I'm not going to sing, but I am going to quote a couple of lines from the songs that you heard as you were coming in. And one that rings true this morning goes a little bit like this. Another summer day has come and gone away in Paris and Rome, but I want to go home. Welcome home, everyone. We're glad you're here today. You know, home is often said is a place where you want to return to over and over and over again. Okay? So this morning we're going to take a few minutes and recognize our people that have come home for several years to CFB. Okay? So this is our little physical activity this morning. We're going to add a little mental activity with it. So you got to listen to the math before we ask you to stand. Okay? So you want to practice? Everybody that's here this morning, please stand. Okay. Good. That was the first easy question. All right, now you can sit down. All right, we'll bring the lights up a little bit. We want to acknowledge those coming home for several years in CFB. So let's start with, make sure you do the math here. If you've been in CFB 1 year, last year was your first, so you've been in CFB 1 year, but less than 5 years, please stand. Welcome home. All right, you can sit down. Now, if you've been in CFB 5 years, but less than 10, please stand. Welcome home. Now, if you've been in CFB 10 years, but less than 15, please stand. If you've been in CFB 15 years, but less than 20, please stand at this time. All right, now we have some folks that have returned for many years that we are grateful for. So if you've been in CFB 20 or more years, please stand. Wow. Thank you for coming home all these years. Now, any team, any family, they always welcome new members to the family and team each year. So we have some new people out there that this is going to be their first year in CFB. So I'd like for those people to please stand at this time and keep standing because we're going to tell you a little something. Please stand. First year. All right, keep standing. Welcome to the team. You sure I can't sing one song just real quick? Okay, all right. Well, I'll start with another line from the song that those returning teammates that you saw, and myself, we want to tell you this. Just know you're not alone. We're going to make this place your home. You can be seated. You know, I have the honor and privilege of being your superintendent, and it is indeed an honor. And I'm fortunate to serve with 7 elected officials who understand the importance of public schools. Okay? And I want you to know this. Good schools don't happen by accident. Good districts don't happen by accident. They start with good governance and guidance from your Board of Trustees. And I believe, and I've been in this business a long time, I've been coming home a long time as well, but I believe we have the best Board of Trustees, the best school board team in the state of Texas, and I would say probably in the country. And I want to introduce them at this time. I'm going to introduce them individually, and I want you to give them a big welcome, CFB welcome, as I introduce them this morning. Okay? So school board members, would you stand when I call your name? We're going to start with, right here in the front row, Miss Nancy Watton, longtime teacher and now school board member. And we have the newest member to our team. Welcome, Mr. Randy Shackman. We also have school board member, long time, been returning home many years, Mr. John Matthews. Also with us this morning, an R.L. Turner High School graduate, Mr. Richard Fleming. Feels like home, right? We also have with us this morning our vice president this year, Mr. Frank Short. And then also we have our board president, Mr. James Good. You know, our board members do a tremendous amount of service for us, unpaid, okay? And they couldn't all be here this morning for every session, but the fact that they're here, the fact that they give many hours in commitment to our school district and our community is pretty phenomenal, and we are blessed that we have them. And you'll hopefully, well, the other team, the other groups this afternoon will meet the rest of our board members. You know, Henry Ford once said, "We do know this, if public schools survive, so will democracy." Let me say that again. We know this, if public schools survive, so will democracy. If you think about that just for a moment, it lets you know how important your job is. All of our jobs in public schools, extremely important. Okay? We are the cornerstone of democracy in this great country. We have no other system anywhere in the world like the public schools of this country. Okay? And despite what we read sometimes, despite what we hear sometimes, I would contend and I would argue that we're still doing the best job of any country to promote democracy in our public schools. Okay? So with that task before us, what do we need to do? Well, I'm going to talk to you about three things this morning that I believe are essential for us to do as a public school system to survive. The first one is we got to design a system. We got to improve the system, and we have to achieve results. Design, improve, achieve. Let's start with that first word, design. When you look at the definition of design, it means to intend for a specific purpose. And in this school district, we have a specific purpose. Make no mistake about it. Our specific purpose is student achievement. High student achievement for all students, to be exact. That is our goal. That is our specific purpose. That is why we exist. Okay? So we start to design a system around that purpose and that goal. And then we add some objectives for clarification, to make sure people are going in the right direction and working on the right things. Objective number one, instructional practice. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that objective later. Objective 2, learning environment. Objective 3, operational effectiveness. And objective 4, community support. One goal, 4 objectives, our strategic plan, our design to accomplish our goal of high achievement and to make sure public schools survive. Selfishly, make sure this public school system survives. Design is critical. This is our strategic plan. This is our design to accomplish our goal. The next word I want to talk to you about is improve. And when you look up improve, you see the words become better. That's an important concept to our strategic plan. We believe in this district that every day we give our best. And every day we give our best to get better, to meet our goal and our objectives. That's a commitment you make by joining this family, that you're going to give your very best every day for student achievement. That's an important concept in our strategic plan. Okay? And I'm going to talk just a little bit about what we do strategically to accomplish those objectives. I mentioned to you before instructional practice. That's the heart of our work, guys. It's all about instruction. It's all about teaching. It's the only variable we control. We don't control anything else. We can't control where they come from. We can't control what happened to them the night before. We can't control if they've been fed at home. We can't control if they've been fed at school, and we do that. But what we do control is our instructional practice. How good we are at teaching. How good are we? And we do in this district a thing called instructional rounds to help us continue to improve our instructional practice. And we're getting better and better at that. Okay? We have some of the best instructors in the world, and we have many that are continuing to get better and get there. And that's our commitment to you. We will get better at instructional practice. We will have a curriculum that's relevant and rigorous and aligned. And then we'll provide an infrastructure for you to give you support. You know, teaching's not easy. Okay? It's very complicated and complex. We believe that you deserve the best support possible. So we're going to create an infrastructure of specialists and facilitators and coaches designed to help you get better at instructional practice. That's our design in this system. Okay. Objective 2, the learning environment. That's extremely important because kids won't learn if they don't feel safe and they don't feel loved. Okay? We want to have the best physical facilities possible, but we also want to have the best emotional environments for kids to learn. Okay? We have some great buildings. We have a great staff in this district that work to make the buildings the best physical plant possible. But what happens inside the doors is even more important. Okay? Our third objective, operational effectiveness. You know, unfortunately, school districts aren't blessed with all the resources in the world. Okay? And 2 years ago, we faced a pretty horrific storm in this system and systems all across the state of Texas. And the legislature cut millions and millions of dollars from each school district. So 2 years ago, we had to pick up the pieces after that storm and survive. And thanks to our Board of Trustees, with good governance and good guidance, we weathered that storm, okay? And we were able to come out in pretty good shape. We still have a few scars, but we weathered that storm and results were even higher, okay? And so this morning, I want to tell you, and I want us to thank our board because of their work and all of your work together as a team, we weathered a storm, and for this school year, we're going to give a 2.5% raise across the board for everyone. Yes, this is where you clap. You know, that's pretty phenomenal. If you've read the papers and you've seen all that stuff, which you have, you know that that's pretty exceptional. But in addition to that 2.5%, we're going to continue our longevity pay. Okay? Those people that stood up with those 5+ years experience, yeah, absolutely. And we're also going to put our money where our mouth is because we believe that our job is student achievement. And when we reach goals of student achievement, we're going to reward the team, everybody on the team. Okay? I'm going to talk a little bit more about 2011, 2012. It was an important year for us and how we stood amongst the 200 largest school districts in Texas in terms of academic performance ranking. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But this board is committed to giving us an incentive and pay for that performance. And you'll hear me talk more about that as I come visit your campuses throughout the year. But it's about rewarding what you value, and we value student achievement at the highest levels. The last objective, community support, oh so valuable. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. We'll come back to it. The third piece of our formula, achieve. The word achieve means to get or attain by effort. You've heard us talk about effort before in this school district. Effort produces achievement. Okay? And you may not know everything there is to know about teaching and learning yet, but you can always give effort. Okay? And your students may struggle with the concepts, but they can always give effort. We believe effort produces achievement. So let's take a minute to look at what our efforts have produced. Number 7. May not mean anything to you right now when you first see it, but that's a really important number. Okay? A really important number. Okay? I told you earlier, we're about instruction. We're about measuring how well we do with instruction. You've heard me talk about a scorecard called ERG, and its Academic Performance Index, which ranks us against the 200 largest school districts in Texas academically. How do we do with the kids we serve compared to everybody else? Okay? It's not a rating, it's a ranking. You're either first, you're last, or you're somewhere in between. We like that, okay? Because we want to be, obviously, number one. But number 7's not a bad number either, okay? In 2010, 2011, we were number 17. We'd been in that top 20 spot for several years. But in 2011, 2012, and I know it's a year old, we'll talk later about it when I come out to your campuses, but 2011, 2012, we went from 17 to number 7. Give yourself a hand. Number 1 is next. Let's look at some more numbers. This may be the most important number up here. 1763, 1,763. Take a minute to think about what you think that number is. Because I would contend it may be the most important number. 1,763 graduates of Carrollton-Farmers branch last school year. Our instructional practice has got to be designed to get them across that stage, guys. Okay? For public schools to survive, we got to get more kids across that stage. Okay? That's what high achievement means. And in this school district, you don't get to walk this stage unless you've done that. We're doing our part to make public schools stay strong and survive. Okay? $28 million worth of scholarships those students received last year. The largest ever for us in this school district. Yeah, you can clap. Let's look at some more numbers this morning. And I talked earlier about community support. You know, in a school district, you can't do it alone. You need the work, you need the help of many volunteers. Our school board, they're volunteers. Okay? We can't do it without them. So you have to have volunteers, you have to have community support to come to help you do our work. Okay? And to support us not only with financial resources, but as helpers in the school, volunteers, etc. We had 9,087 volunteers that volunteered in our schools last year. That's pretty phenomenal. But what's more phenomenal about that is that translates into 32,559 hours of service to us through those volunteers. Okay? Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty phenomenal. But this number is the most staggering that you may have not thought about before. When you translate those hours to labor and the cost, they have contributed $1,019,480 to this school district that we didn't pay out of the resources that went back to the classroom because of their volunteering. We have to keep the community engaged. Absolutely. Hey, we can't do it without them. We need their support volunteering. We will need their support for financial resources in the future. All right. So that leads us to our last objective that I said I would come back to a little bit more. Community support. You know, our community, they are our customers. Okay? Public schools are not the only game in town. We're not the only provider of education. Private schools, charter schools, online schools, some we haven't even thought about yet. Okay? I'm sure somebody's going to create an app for schools. Okay? And just get it on your phone, and you got school. We've got a lot of competition. We want to make sure that our customers choose us. Okay? And you may not have thought about your role in public schools as providing customer service, but you do. You provide a service to your students. You provide a service to those parents. You provide service to each other. Okay? Customer service is internal and external. And if it doesn't start internal, it's hard to spread externally. So we want to treat each other well. We're each other's customers, and we want to treat the external customers just as well. So we have a short video we want to show you this morning about the importance of customer service. be thinking about what this video is going to tell you. All right? And it's coming, so a little wait time. Be patient. Absolutely. They're the most important people, the people that walk in our doors. Okay? You know, we talked earlier about learning environment. And all of our objectives have a little bit of independence and interdependence with them. But people will appreciate you if you show that you care about them and that you care about them being there. You want them to be there. Okay? If you treat parents that way, they know that you're treating the students that way. Okay? And all the visitors in our campuses. We can't do it without them. We're going to need their support. For public schools to survive, we're going to need the public's support. So I would contend that customer service is ever more important than ever. Okay? So in this district, we're going to bring out the welcome mat. Okay? And we're going to welcome them all in our doors and thank them for coming. I'm going to come back at the end of our speaker and close today's convocation. But this time, it's my privilege and honor to introduce our speaker. Michael Brick was a journalist for the New York Times. He has written a book called Saving the School. Okay? I would encourage you to read that book. That book is so important to recognize our work and how difficult it is to do what you do. But a high school in Austin, Texas was able to save the school with what we talked about this morning. Instructional practice, a learning environment that makes a difference. Making good use of their resources and getting community support. Okay? It's an outstanding book. I think you would really enjoy it. It's a tribute to the American high school and all that it brings. But the other thing I want to tell you about Michael Brick before he comes on the stage is he is a graduate of R.L. Turner High School. So with that, let's welcome home Michael Brick.
How y'all doing? Thank you, Dr. Burns, for having me here and for that great introduction. I'm going to try and follow the guy who just gave the audience a raise. I got the $2 tour from Chris Julian when I got here. This place looks absolutely amazing. I haven't been on this stage since the Battle of the Bands in 1991, but we lost. But, you know, back when I was here, high school was a lot different, for teachers especially. The facilities weren't nearly as beautiful as they were, but the standardized testing requirements weren't nearly as challenging as they were either. We had a whole lot of teachers who brought the world to life for us. I remember dissecting a frog in Mr. Reichley's class, and two teachers who are here today, Miss Reese and Miss Christie, Miss Cheever, I'm sorry, Miss Reese and Miss Cheever taught the American Experience class where we read The Grapes of Wrath and learned the meaning of the Dust Bowl and read 1984 and learned about the origins of the Cold War. And we stalked around the hallways putting out a school newspaper and reporting on the disciplinary response to a big fight in the parking lot. The gang scare of the early 90s was on back then. There were tons of great experienced teachers here, and unfortunately for all of them, I already knew everything. So there's this one moment with one teacher I want to tell you about, and I have to confess that I'm unable to bring her name to mind, but so little was my regard for my teachers at the time. But this was a senior year elective called Parenthood and Child Development. And I was way too cool to be in this. I was way too smart to be in this. I didn't need any of this stuff. I was on the debate team, which is really cool. And so one day in Parenthood and Child Development, this young woman who was 23 or 24, definitely the ink was still wet on the teaching certificate, and I was just going to tear her apart and give her a hard time for the entire semester, decided that we would have a debate in class about some issue of parenthood, boys against girls, something like that. And she gave us laid out the rules. One side would be able to say their piece, and the other side would get a chance to rebut. Well, it was my belief, as Mr. Debate Team guy, that the word is refute. So I challenged her on this, and of course, I'm trying to make a big fool of her in class. And the next day she came back and we got the debate started, and she sets out the rules and sets everything up, and just before we get started, turns to me with a copy of, I kid you not, Merriam-Webster's, and says, "Oh, by the way, Mr. Brick, I looked it up, and rebut does mean to provide the opposite argument." And so, well. Maybe I didn't know everything after all. This revelation served me well in a journalism career, where you're expected to ask a lot of questions. It works best if you go in thinking that you don't know everything. I went off to New York for a decade or so and worked at the Times, and came home to Texas for the reasons that you leave New York after your 20s and early 30s, and came across this high school in East Austin, where I live now, that, among other things, happened to be my wife's alma mater. But as a writer looking for a good story to tell, I was attracted to the ticking clock. John H. Reagan High School in East Austin was 4 years academically unacceptable. You know, the numbers are really bad. They have been for a long time. And so the school has essentially been given 1 year to bring up scores, or the state's going to shut them down. As a writer, that's just perfect. That's a narrative thread that you can hang everything else on. So I went in looking to take kind of a long, hard look at what we're throwing away in this big national purge. We're shutting down schools all over the country, most famously recently in Philadelphia, but lots and lots of them in New York City and Chicago and California and here in Texas as well. And I was expecting to produce some sort of elegiac take on, you know, the last public high school or whatever. And instead, I found a dynamic principal leading a group of passionate, dedicated teachers at a place with a proud tradition to rally the community around. So the situation at John H. Reagan High School in 2009 is so bad that parents are getting letters home that say, listen, if you want, you can go. Any parent with the wherewithal can't be blamed for trying to put their children in the best situation they can. A lot of the students that ended up at Reagan were either those who were too poor, too unable to get access to transportation to get out. And this is the important part. There was also a group that were too loyal to leave. Their parents had been Reagan Raiders, or their aunts and uncles had been Reagan Raiders, and this was just the place for them. That sort of community spirit around the place was what Annabelle Garza, the principal at Reagan High, referred to as a heartbeat in the school. As bad as it was in 2009, Reagan High in the 1960s had been 3-time state football champs. That's 5A. I spent a lot of time in the History Center going through the clips and read stories of the madrigal singers touring Europe and bringing back word of their experience on the continent, and the ladies who volunteer in the library and have time for coffee, and people remembered this stuff. This had been the pride of the sort of new suburbs in the mid-60s, and morphed into the pride of Black East Austin in the 70s and 80s, and then just got hit in the standardized testing squeeze. And once you get that academically unacceptable label and the letters start going home to the parents, it's hard to pull out. So I wanted to see what happens at sort of the worst it can get. The worst place your school can end up in the system that our state and federal governments have set out for education in this country, and see what our most dedicated teachers and coaches and administrators are able to do. So I went around looking for some folks to follow through the course of this school year. I want to read you, just introduce them to you by reading to you a little bit about how I met them. This is the first day of school, right after morning announcements. Annabelle Garza is in her office finishing her morning announcements. Annabelle put the microphone down. Her office looked like a sublet. Other than pictures of her own children, she had managed to hang little more than an outdated portrait of the city skyline taken before all the new condo towers went up, a whiteboard to be used in planning 900 student schedules after one of the assistant principals tried to do it on a computer, and of course that hadn't worked out because Annabelle didn't trust computers much, and a sign that said, "Sometimes you just have to take the leap and build your wings on the way down." There hadn't been much time to decorate. The lobby's trophy case looked like a time capsule. Newer photos showed charity scholarship winners flashing wads of play cash. A sign written with a felt marker proclaimed, "Raiders raid knowledge." A week ago, with the superintendent's visit looming, Annabelle had finally taken one of the guidance counselors aside and asked, "Karstafen will be here Monday. What do you need to make this presentable?" "Money." So Annabelle went digging in her purse to pay for a trip to IKEA and then walked across the courtyard picking up trash, muttering, the other principals are not doing this right now. The other principals also didn't have their younger sisters moving in to take care of their 10-year-old daughters so they could spend more time at the high school, but Annabelle did. Most nights, she was out past dark, negotiating with missionaries to open a social services center on campus, trying to fill a job called school improvement facilitator, and making mental lists of who was missing books, who was missing desks, and who was just missing. "So what's the drama?" Annabelle said, opening a last-minute staff meeting. "Can I give you the short version?" an assistant principal replied, scanning a detailed email concerning a science teacher's informal largesse and the jealousy it had inspired. Miss Kaiser gave her beat-up cafeteria tables to Miss Bauer. Somebody suggested confiscating all the furniture from the science wing. That'd show 'em. Annabelle laughed her head-back laugh. "Learning happens in many different ways," she said. "I'm just saying." But even something this silly could get out of hand, and she knew it, the way resources were stretched, the pressure everybody was under, the science teachers especially. That was where scores most needed to come up. Annabelle looked to the ceiling. After 15 years as an administrator, she knew Miss Kaiser's kind. Miss Kaiser was young. Miss Kaiser had time and energy to spare, and apparently tables, too. Annabelle had been like Miss Kaiser once, in another life, it seemed. "Can you tell Carmen to lasso those teachers up?" she said. "I told them do not move furniture." Then she hurried the talk along to bell schedules and bus schedules. Some ordinary drama made for a pleasant distraction, and after that there was still the matter of the squirrel eating through IT cables to address. After the meeting, Annabelle made her rounds. She came across a teacher agonizing over whether to shut down his fish tank on account of the citywide drought restrictions. "No," Annabelle told him, peering into the bubbling aquarium. "There's a living thing in there." So, Annabelle, I could tell from day one, was going to be the dynamic character that could carry me through a school year. But to really explore the story of what's happening inside this high school on the brink, I figured I next needed a science or math teacher. That's where the scores needed to come up the most, and so I went asking around, and found a young woman named Candace Kaiser, who was had done some partying at UT and done some nannying and was trying to find her way, and had come around to the Teaching Fellows program, and had really started to find her Christian faith at the time, which was kind of the first thing on the table between the two of us when we're talking about this journalistic project, because, Christian groups working with and in high schools, this is going to be a dicey subject, and sure enough, if you go on the internet and Google her name now, you can find atheist groups that think that Candace is the worst person in the entire world for being involved in Bible meetings that her students attended. But it's also true that the Stone Church, the church that had kind of adopted the neighborhood, provided hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that came in and helped the school out at a crucial time. I'm not necessarily taking a position on any side of this, but I think that Dr. Burns alluded to opening up the school to the community, putting out the welcome mat, and that often means parents, but also anybody who's willing and eager to help out a public school. So I'm going to introduce you to Candace on her first day in the classroom. This is not her first year teaching, but it's the first day of school. She'd been awake half the night, praying on it. The video she'd finished editing at a coffee shop early that morning, queued up from her laptop to the overhead projector, was supposed to make these kids look beyond their own concerns. Still, she had her doubts. Maybe she was in over her head. There was always the medical school idea. Dr. Candace M. Kaiser, pediatrics. It sounded nice, helping kids and getting tangible results and even getting thanked. Or maybe she'd just go back to nannying. That had been one way to use a degree in human development, all right, building a resume full of accomplishments such as carried out developmentally appropriate activities that centered around the children's interests, earning references from corporate lawyers / guilt-ridden moms who could afford the services of a glorified babysitter with a higher education and the student loans to show for it. Nannying had always left plenty of time to party and some to volunteer, with College Bound and then with the Red Cross after Katrina, enough at first to satisfy her craving for something she was still trying to define. And the work? Sometimes all you had to tell a toddler was, use your words, and the lines of communication would open right up. Magical compared to spending her whole day enforcing the 3 rules so important and yet apparently so impossible that she had to post them in big block letters on her classroom wall. Be on time, be respectful, no electronics, ever. Candace made her way around the ring of desks, pushing in the extra chairs she'd borrowed to accommodate spillover crowds. She needed them no matter how many times she'd been told no moving furniture. Science was where the scores had to come up. Science classes were always packed. Call it the chicken and the egg, but from the front of the classroom, it meant that even during the worst recession in 3 generations, at a school district facing a $7 million budget shortfall, in a school facing closure due to a whole other set of complex socioeconomic factors, nobody was talking about laying off science teachers. Science, math, special ed, you were golden. The district was even defending recruitment and retention bonuses. The new superintendent had to answer to the same set of numbers. Candace was just warming to the job. She was only 26. She had options. In the last few years, she had learned the hard way how the assortment of options available to a college-educated white woman in 21st century America could be confounding, dizzying, even paralyzing. In her mind, they added up to a debt. Her Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Texas had afforded her the time and instruction to ponder not just the chemistry relevant to her current trade, but also language and government, nutrition and tennis, family relationships and African American history, masterworks of literature, the psychology of sex and contemporary moral problems, an intellectual smorgasbord unfathomable to many of the developing teenage minds of those who would soon fill the extra chairs she was presently pushing into the back of each of the desks in classroom 133 of the science wing. My favorite story of finding a character for this book comes later on the first day of school. I was walking the hallway, and Derek Davis, the basketball coach slash history teacher at Reagan, stopped me in the hallway and saw my notebook and everything and said, "Hey man, listen, I see your notebook. I know you're here with the TEA. I just want to tell you, I played ball here in the early 90s and played in the band, and this place means the world to me, and I've come back here to teach, and I'm coaching the basketball squad, and we had a really rough couple of years, but I think we have a chance to make a playoff run this year." And I said, "Stop right there, man. I'm not from the TEA, but you just passed the audition for adult character number 3. D. Davis will save us. D. Davis will save us. In the back of his mind, Derek Davis could hear it still, rising from these same wooden bleachers, resounding off these same Columbia blue and white cinder block walls, carrying across 2 decades from his own high school triumphs. He could still see the crowds, the parents and the girls chanting. He could still feel that couplet's lazy rhyme. Save us, Davis. Save us by the grace of the jump shot handed down as your birthright, bequest of a hood legend, prodigal son of the East Side. At the moment, Derek wasn't looking too salvational. Antsy, more like. He was standing in front of the bleachers, twirling a whistle around his wrist, shifting his weight from left to right to left, giving the boys a minute to settle down. Squint, and he could almost be one of them, 175 pounds, filling out for the 5-foot 11-inch frame he'd trained to elevate, aim, and, legs together now, pebbled leather rolling across the index finger, release. Team photos from his own senior season at Reagan looked like somebody had launched a harpoon with mild acne through a blue Raiders jersey. They'd called him Little Pee-wee because of his dad. Even now, with the class of 90's 20th reunion approaching fast, Derek could still rock a newsboy cap and sneakers with a gray linen suit. But his 30s were ticking away, no denying that. The NBA had never called, the hip-hop labels had never called. Now his fallback job was on the line, and nobody was calling him Little Pee-wee anymore. These boys called him Coach. He watched them tie their shoes, these almost men, his not quite 24 prospects turned out for basketball class on the first day of school. They knew what people were saying about Reagan. They knew the stakes. They knew what 1 year meant. Why pile onto that? As things stood, there were just enough heads to round out varsity, JV, and freshman squads if he didn't make any cuts. And he wouldn't, of course, make any cuts. Derek had been recruiting these boys almost half their lives. They were sixth graders the year he started coaching at Reagan in 2003, playing together as the Pirates of Pierce Middle School, an off-season AAU. Most of them had deep roots on the east side, but Reagan was a hard sell that year. As these boys and their parents and the whole country knew, 2003 was the year of the stabbing, the year Reagan High reasserted itself into the national headlines, this time as the place where a 15-year-old girl called Ortrala Mosley was attacked by her estranged boyfriend. The incident cost Ortrala her life, the estranged boyfriend a 40-year prison sentence, the district hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal settlements, and the school newfound notoriety as the setting for an episode of America's Most Wanted. In its immediate aftermath, a pack of lawyers commissioned to examine the state of affairs at Reagan found elevated levels of aggression, inconsistent disciplinary enforcement, and, in a deflating bit of understatement, quote, a limited degree of positive school spirit or attachment among students, parents, and staff. So recruiting wasn't easy, but Derek hadn't seen much other choice. Recruiting was the new way. The old way was, you go where your big brothers and sisters went, because that's where you live, and where you're from, and where your friends go, and part of who you are and what you're becoming. Derek had gone to Reagan because there was nothing finer you could wear to Highland Mall on a crisp Saturday afternoon than a Columbia blue leather jacket, and also just because of the map. It wasn't the old way anymore, not in the crumbling inner rings of the first American suburbs. Not since Garnett and Kobe and LeBron made high school the new proving ground for the draft. Not since Division I colleges started offering delayed scholarships to eighth graders. And not since education reformers started singling out schools, quote, identified for improvement. His first month on the job, Derek got in tight with Marlon Vincent, a junior playing center on the team. Marlon was manifestly gifted. Even after skipping freshman ball, he'd made the varsity as a sophomore and right away started dunking on the big white boys out at Westlake. He was a loyal and generous teammate, too, the kind who would recite all the other players' names when a sports writer from the local paper came around. But more important, Marlon had a little brother, Malcolm, a double-digit scorer who was on his way to regional all-star selection. Malcolm wasn't necessarily better than Marlon, but that wasn't the point. Prevailing upon Marlon to stay meant acquiring Malcolm and all his little homies. It meant reasserting the traditional order of things. You go where your people went, the neighborhood school. You build something together, and that thing builds something in you, too. Over the course of the 2009-2010 school year, I watched an amazing transformation, but not an instant transformation. It's the kind of thing that a filmmaker would have to use a montage for. You know, when things are really bad and the school's going to shut down tomorrow, hundreds of people turn out to march in front of the Capitol. But there are plenty of PTA meetings during this, make or break year. There are 3 or 4 people show up and somebody's translating into Spanish for no reason because nobody else is there. But drawing in the community meant a continual and persistent effort to reach out, and that's to parents, to churches, to neighborhood groups, to volunteer organizations, to accept help, to take yes for an answer, but also to buckle down and lead and do things that you're not that aren't necessarily in the playbook. There's one last passage I want to read you. That this is the thing that astonished me more than anything else in the year that I spent at Reagan High. Was the recruiting. I mentioned this a little bit with basketball, but this was going on all over the school. So in this scene, Annabelle Garza, the principal, has gathered together some of the best of the school band and the top athlete and the dance squad, and they're going to go visit a middle school and try and convince middle schoolers to come to Reagan. Annabelle hurried out to the bus, where the marching band had a solid rhythm going with mallets and drumsticks on the seat backs. She stood up front and counted heads. Her star athlete turned up in sandals. "Where are your tennis shoes?" Annabelle asked. "I don't have any," Jaquarius said, joking. "You're going to wear mine. You better wrap them around your feet. What size do you wear?" 14. Annabelle passed around flyers describing Reagan's electives, meant for distribution to the middle school kids. "We've got every sport but swim team," said Jaquarius, who was on 4 of those teams, counting golf. "We need a swim team." Annabelle said, "You want to be on it?" The bus pulled out of the lot, its passenger manifest chosen by an imprecise amalgam of grades, profile, and charisma. The kids bounced in their seats, away from class for an hour. They rode off toward middle schools they'd once attended, on an errand to convince at least a few of the more capable 8th graders that Reagan High might have more to offer than 4 years of tax cramming and the avoidance of getting stabbed. Annabelle draped her arm across the seat back, tucking a leg to achieve that position at her stature, and surveyed her troop. The band kids had been an easy choice, the drum line in particular. They drew a crowd wherever they went, from the Miller parking lot to formal competitions. They'd been called up to play on the Friday Night Lights TV show, and this morning they'd dressed up their uniforms with headbands that said Soul and Columbia Blue. Still, Jaquarius was the main attraction, Mr. Reagan High. On the football field, he stood out just by showing up, an athlete among scrubs. Some college programs were looking at him, Baylor and a couple bigger ones too. As he told it, that had been his plan all along, to shine against the backdrop of a fallen dynasty. But the lesson of the losing season was hard to miss. Jaquarius couldn't do it alone. Quote, his delivery may seem long, but he is also having to throw off his back foot a lot, which leads to a lot of inaccurate passes, one college scout wrote. When he's been able to stand up and deliver the ball, he looks like a different player. And for all his devotion to football, Jaquarius was drawing more attention on the basketball court, with the boys who'd been together since middle school. The Raiders had made the local paper's preseason list of 10 teams to watch, at 10th, and the sports writer had said they, quote, could surprise some people. Burned by the memory of last year's regional quarterfinal loss to LBJ, as the kids called it, the team was drawing crowds to its open practices where there wasn't even much to watch but drills. Outlet, shovel, bounce pass, layup, outlet, shovel, bounce pass, layup, with Coach Davis calling, stay low, stay low! The Raiders had opened their season up in Killeen, where people were still reeling from the shooting at the Army post. Playing Harker Heights, a 5A school with 2,536 students and a recognized rating from the state, Reagan had won by 3 points, 57-54. When the bus driver parked behind the cafeteria at Webb Middle School, the drummers and dancers gathered their things. The band director went in to make arrangements. Jaquarius took the chance to give the principal a hard time. Hey, this is illegal recruiting, he said. We're not recruiting, Annabelle said. We're showing off. Then she changed the subject to standardized test prep, and Jaquarius stopped smiling. He had a solid GPA, but his first look at the exit-level tax was coming up. His girlfriend, Ashley, had already passed the tests her junior year. She was applying to Baylor and some places even further away, too. No tax, no college, and no college football. When I get to the test, Jaquarius said, it doesn't translate. I act like I haven't been studying. Annabelle looked for some encouraging words, but a buzzer was sounding from the middle school cafeteria. The 8th graders were starting lunch. If she wanted to attract an incoming freshman class with good students to balance out Reagan's wealth of delinquents, special ed wards, and limited English proficiency cases, it was time to put on a show. All right, chicas, she called, giving the dancers a roundhouse wave. Are you ready? The girls in their sparkling blue followed Jaquarius up the delivery ramp, past a sign tracking the progress of a Thanksgiving can drive, and into the cafeteria with their principal close behind, calling, where are my strutters and my dancerinas at? The bass drummer smashed an opening salvo. The echo resounded from the concrete walls, and somebody called, hit it, Reagan! John Philip Sousa this was not, and the Hay song neither. The drum line teased a march beat, but soon dropped into a slow and low shuffle that might have resembled standard hip-hop, if not for Jesse Martinez clashing those off-brand cymbals together in a tremendous racket, with every muscle in his face straining, and the whole band doing exaggerated tucks and chair steps. The soul strutters took to the floor below the stage, all hip shake and crunk, and the drum line hushed to stick clicks for the call and response. Everybody say, RHS. The drummers called their parts in voices as deep and sonorous as their teenage vocal cords could drop. The soul strutters did a suggestive twist, stopping now and again to fix the sashes of their frayed uniforms. The middle school kids perched on their cafeteria stools, rapt and maybe a little overwhelmed. Somebody introduced the woman responsible for this lunchroom spectacle, the principal of Reagan High School, Ms. Annabelle Garza. We are hearing fantastic things about you at Webb, she told the 8th graders. We hear how smart you are. We're here from Reagan today to identify our future Raiders. She asked for a show of hands. And those of you who aren't coming to Reagan, she went on, we hope we can change your minds today. I'm good, one kid called, and some others laughed. They were only 13, but they'd seen some things. They'd seen their middle school, named for the state's foremost keeper of history, go through the same desperate race to make the numbers. They'd seen their big brothers and sisters staving off a middle school closure order, and now this lady wanted them to come to an academically unacceptable high school for more of the same. Annabelle went on with her pitch, introducing the band, the strutters, the cheerleaders, the yearbook photographer, and the quarterback. As you can tell, Annabelle said, watching the eighth grade girls watch Jaquarius. We have the best looking kids in Austin, the most beautiful girls, the most handsome boys. The drumline took over, grinding hips and twirling sticks and building a great crescendo to a hard stop and silence, frozen in a high-step pose. "Oh, snap," called a middle school girl, and the band lurched back to life. Sweating and straining, Jesse counted off dance steps under his breath and clutched his splintered cymbals through bandanas for a good grip and made a big, big sound. The band played on, a deafening clamor in that unacoustical lunchroom. The Reagan kids worked the room, circulating flyers that told of auto shop and drama club and sports. The middle school girls competed for the attentions of this fine and towering Jaquarius, who made his way up and down each aisle before returning to his place by the stage. When the music stopped, Jaquarius held the door for the drumline, the strutters, and everybody. Last came the principal. The middle school girls didn't stop staring until Jaquarius let the door close behind his back. "I don't know what they see," Annabelle said, shaking her head at Jaquarius, "in a boy with no shoes." So, what I've came away with after a year at Reagan High School with these folks was the story of the most our devoted, hardworking, intelligent, dedicated teachers, administrators, and coaches are able to accomplish in the absolute worst that things can get in the system that we've set out. It's an inspiring story in some ways, but I also hope that it's a story that makes a lot of people angry. You all don't have that luxury. In the next few days, hundreds, I hear it's 2,200 kids are going to show up at Reagan High alone. They might not admit it or even know it, but they're looking to be inspired. And more importantly, they're looking to be challenged. And they're looking to you. Take some questions if you've got any, or Dr. Burns can come back up. Thanks so much for having me out here today, y'all.
Okay, we have a reporter on stage, and he wants us to ask him questions. No questions? Well, again, we want to thank Michael for coming home. Do that. We talked about three things: design, to go about a specific purpose, high achievement for all students. We talked about improve, become better, never stop improving. We talked about achieve. Our effort produces our achievement. On Monday, the summer day, we're going to be gone. And on Monday, 26,000 plus students are going to come to the doors of our schools. And we're going to tell them, welcome home. Have a great school year.